My wife lied about her job while I worked double shifts to pay our mortgage. So I exposed everything and watched her perfect image collapse instantly. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for the longest time, I thought my marriage with Claire was perfect. We met in our early 20s, and it was one of those instant connections, the kind where everything just clicked. She was beautiful, kind, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else ever had. We built a life together, and I thought we were doing it right. I worked too hard, maybe, but I was doing it for us. Double shifts became routine for me. I didn't mind, not really. We had a house to pay for, bills to cover, and plans for a future with kids. That was the dream, right? Claire, on the other hand, was everything I could ask for. Supportive, encouraging, always cheering me on when I came home exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open. She told me I was her hero. She'd whisper, "We're in this together," when I'd leave for work. But it never really occurred to me how much she wasn't carrying her weight. Claire had a job, of course. She'd talk about it a lot, how demanding it was, how tough her boss was, how she stayed late to meet deadlines. Friends and family adored us. We were that couple, always smiling, always glowing. We had the perfect life in the eyes of everyone around us. They'd tell us how lucky we were to have found each other, and I believed them. I thought we were lucky too. I never questioned it. How could I? She'd always seemed so busy with work, so tired, just like me. But I started to notice something that made my stomach churn, even if I ignored it at the time. Claire would sometimes make comments about feeling overwhelmed, about how hard it was to balance everything. She'd sigh heavily after a long day and say things like, "I just need a break from work. It's been so draining lately." She'd say it so casually, and I'd brush it off because, well, who wasn't tired these days? Work is hard, and we're both grinding. But I kept working harder. Double shifts were just my reality, right? I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought Claire was doing her part too. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to wonder, was I the only one pulling weight in this relationship? The more I thought about it, the more things didn't add up. Claire had her job, but the details kept slipping through my fingers like water. She'd mention meetings, late nights at the office, and deadlines, but she rarely mentioned any specifics. I'd ask her about it sometimes, just to keep the conversation going. But she'd always give me vague answers like, "Oh, I can't really talk about it," or "It's all just very corporate stuff." I didn't press her. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been supportive, always so kind. But something felt off. It wasn't one thing, but a collection of little moments that started to poke at me. Like a tiny itch I couldn't scratch. One day, I came home from another brutal 14-hour shift, my feet aching, my body exhausted. I expected Claire to be winding down after her day, maybe making dinner or relaxing with a book. Instead, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, smiling at something on the screen. "Busy day?" I asked, just to make conversation. She barely looked up. "Yeah, a lot of emails to answer, some calls to make. Same old, same old." I thought it was strange that she didn't mention any of the specific tasks she usually would have. I couldn't help but notice that she didn't seem tired, no stress in her voice, no exhaustion in her face, just the usual casual vibe. But I let it slide, as I always did. After all, it was just a bad day, right? I had enough on my plate to worry about. I couldn't expect her to always be as stressed as I was. Then came the weekend, and she wanted to go out with some friends. I agreed, though I could have used the rest. She'd been talking about a work retreat all week, and it was clear she'd been looking forward to it. But when I dropped her off at the cafe, where she said she'd be meeting her coworkers, I saw her walking towards the door with a huge smile on her face. Only it wasn't a work smile. She was laughing, clearly in a good mood, like she had no care in the world. I wasn't stupid. I knew she'd never mentioned meeting anyone from work that day. But still, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Maybe it was just a friend of hers who worked in the same building, or someone she'd met at the office. It wasn't like I could track her every move. That would be, well, weird, right? But as I watched her walk into that cafe, something twisted in my gut. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't have the courage to confront her then. I didn't know what I'd even say. Instead, I just drove off, wondering if I was just imagining things. The next few weeks were a blur. Work was piling up, and I kept pushing myself harder to keep everything afloat. But Claire's behavior was starting to gnaw at me in ways I couldn't ignore. There were more and more little things, slight changes in her stories, moments that didn't quite add up. She'd tell me about her late nights at work. But when I asked about specific details, what she was working on, what tasks she had to finish, her responses were always vague. "Oh, just the usual stuff," she'd say, smiling like it was no big deal. "You wouldn't understand. It's really technical." But the more she said it, the more it felt like a wall was going up between us. And the worst part, she never seemed to look tired. I'd come home from my shifts, barely able to keep my eyes open, and Claire would be sitting on the couch, looking completely fresh. Her makeup was always on point, her hair perfect. Meanwhile, I was lucky if I had the energy to even change out of my work clothes. I had to keep reminding myself that she wasn't meant to be working as hard as I was. Maybe it was just the difference in our jobs, right? But one evening, everything came to a head. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when Claire walked in, holding her phone up like she was taking a call. "Hey, I'll be back in a little while," she said casually, her voice chipper. "I'm just going to grab some dinner with a colleague." "You don't mind, do you?" It was odd. She'd never mentioned a colleague before, not once, and she hadn't mentioned any plans earlier that day. "Wait, dinner? With who?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked slightly. "Oh, it's just Sarah, from the office," Claire said, brushing it off with a quick smile. "She's in town for a meeting, and we're grabbing something real quick. It's no big deal." I nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, something shifted. Why hadn't she mentioned Sarah before? Why hadn't she told me earlier? I didn't even know this Sarah existed. As Claire rushed out, I found myself staring at the front door. My gut twisted in knots, and suddenly, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept in the dark. But I had no real reason to confront her. It was just dinner with a colleague, right? Still, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that this was more than just a simple dinner. There was something deeper here, something that I wasn't being told. I decided, for the first time, to dig a little deeper. Just a quick glance at Claire's phone, history nothing intrusive, just a glance. I had to know. I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. But that gnawing feeling, the one I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried, pushed me to do something I never thought I would. I waited for Claire to get home. When she walked through the door, her eyes lit up, but I could see the exhaustion beneath them. She was trying to hide it, but it was there. "Hey, babe, I'm home," she said, dropping her bag on the floor. Dinner was great. Sarah's in town for a few days, so it was good catching up. "Yeah, I'm sure," I replied, my voice flat, the weight of everything I'd been holding back finally making its way to the surface. I couldn't hide it anymore. "So, when did Sarah join your office? I didn't know you worked so closely with her." Claire froze for a second, and that brief hesitation hit me like a slap. It was the first time I'd seen her look uncertain. "Oh, she just started working with us a few weeks ago," she said quickly, but her smile seemed strained. "It's not a big deal, I swear." I didn't buy it. Not for a second, really. "You've never mentioned her before?" "I didn't even know she was coming to dinner tonight." My voice was shaking now, but I couldn't stop myself. "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire's expression shifted. Her smile faltered, replaced by something cold. "You're overreacting. It's just dinner. It's not like I'm hiding something from you," but I wasn't buying her deflection anymore. Something felt off. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, like I was being gaslighted. My own wife was lying to my face, and she thought I wouldn't notice. "Stop lying to me, Claire," I said, my voice firm, cutting through the tension in the room. "You haven't been honest with me?" "I know you haven't." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" She snapped, suddenly defensive. I stood up, my fists clenching at my sides. "I know you haven't been working these late nights like you say. I've seen the receipts, Claire. I've seen the social media posts, the dinner dates, the vacations. You've been lying to me about everything. I don't know what's going on, but I need to know the truth." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Claire's face flushed with anger, but there was something in her eyes now, something darker, almost like she was caught. She crossed her arms over her chest, her voice low but sharp. "So what? You've been snooping around behind my back. You don't trust me, do you?" I felt my heart race. This wasn't the conversation I expected. This wasn't the apology I was hoping for. "No, I don't trust you," I said, each word tasting bitter. "Not anymore." For a moment, there was silence. I could see the mask of the perfect wife crack just a little, but Claire quickly wiped it away and put on a fake smile. "Fine, if you don't trust me, then maybe you should just leave." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the crack behind it. "You're obviously looking for a reason to leave me, so why don't you just get it over with?" It was like a slap in the face. I was hoping for an explanation, a tearful confession. But instead, I was met with defensiveness. She wasn't going to admit anything. She wasn't going to make it easy for me. I felt everything crashing down in that moment. My wife, the woman I loved, wasn't the person I thought she was. The perfect life I'd built in my mind, the one I'd worked so hard to protect, was just an illusion. The rage and confusion mixed in my chest, pulling me into a dark place. But I had to know more. I turned, grabbing my phone from the counter. "I'm done. I'll be back later. But I'm not leaving this room until I get the full story." I walked out the door, my mind spinning, my heart racing. Something told me that when I got back, everything would have changed. But how would she finally admit it? Would she double down? Either way, I was done playing the fool. I don't know how long I drove around that night. My head was spinning, heart racing with 1,000 questions. I couldn't sit still, couldn't go back home and pretend like everything was fine. I kept thinking about Claire's face, her tone, the way she dismissed everything. I needed answers, so I did something I never thought I would. I went through her phone. I knew it was a violation of trust. I knew it wasn't right. But what other choice did I have? The lies were stacking up higher than I could see, and I was drowning in them. I had to know the truth. I parked in an empty lot, sat there for what felt like hours, and then I opened her messages. The first thing I found was her texts with Sarah, the colleague who I'd never heard of before. They weren't about work at all. Instead, it was a series of plans for a weekend getaway. There were mentions of a hotel, a couple of restaurants, and even a spa appointment. But the thing that froze me in my tracks was the date. The date was the same weekend she had told me. She was working late at the same time I was busting my ass on another double shift. I couldn't breathe. My stomach dropped like I'd been hit with a ton of bricks. I read the texts over and over, trying to make sense of them, trying to figure out what I was missing. But it wasn't just the weekend getaway that caught my attention. It was the way Claire talked about me, how she complained about how overbearing I was, how she was just so tired of pretending everything was perfect. There was no sign of the loving wife I thought I had. In fact, the more I read, the more I realized how little she had cared for me. She was using me like some kind of ATM, a provider, someone who would keep her life comfortable while she lived out her secret fantasies with someone else. I kept scrolling, my hands shaking, and then I found something even worse. An email from her work, the company she had claimed to be working for. The subject line read, "Your resignation has been processed." It was dated 2 months ago. That's when she'd stopped working. I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. I was gasping for air, trying to process the betrayal, the lies that had been hidden right in front of me. The woman I had been supporting, the one I thought was my partner, had been living a completely different life. She'd stopped working, lied about it, and I'd been too blind to see it. My mind was racing, and I realized then that this wasn't just about a few lies. This was about everything. She'd been playing me. She'd been pretending for months, maybe longer, while I worked myself into the ground. I had to do something. I couldn't let this go. But before I could decide what to do next, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was Claire. "Where are you?" She texted, "I thought we were talking tonight. Come home?" I stared at the screen for a moment, my hands trembling. How could I even face her now? How could I go back to the woman who had turned my entire life into a lie? But I had to. I had to confront her. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending like everything was fine when it was falling apart. I started the car and drove back home. The truth was out now. But the real question was, what would I do with it? Would I expose her? Would I confront her head-on and finally end this charade? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let her get away with this. I don't remember much of the drive home. It was like I was on autopilot, my mind spinning in a million directions, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks, but the shock had started to wear off, and what was left behind felt like a deep, hollow emptiness, a void that I didn't know how to fill. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, the engine idling. I stared at the front door, knowing Claire was inside, waiting for me. She'd texted me again after the last message. "Don't make me worry. I'm not mad. Let's just talk." I wanted to punch something. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I was too numb. I got out of the car, walked into the house, and tried to act normal. Claire was sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, looking up at me with those big doe eyes that used to melt me. She had no idea what was coming. "Hey," she said softly, "you're home?" I was starting to get worried. I didn't respond at first. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, and my hands shaking at my sides. I wanted to say so many things, accuse her, demand answers, tell her how badly she'd hurt me, but I couldn't. My voice was stuck. It felt like I was suffocating. Finally, I forced out, "We need to talk." Her smile faded, and she immediately knew something was wrong. About what? I didn't even know where to start. The lies, the betrayal, the years I'd wasted, giving everything I had to someone who was using me as a stepping stone. I thought I knew her, but this person sitting in front of Mishi wasn't who I'd married. "I know you're not working anymore, Claire," I said, my voice low and controlled. I didn't want to yell, but the rage inside me was barely contained. "I know you've been lying about everything. The weekends, the vacations, the late nights at work. All of it was a lie." Her face went pale, and I could see her quickly scrambling for something to say, something to save herself. But I was done. "You've been using me, Claire," I continued, stepping closer. "You've been pretending this whole time, while I've been out there working myself into the ground, thinking everything was okay." "Thinking we were okay?" She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me like I had slapped her. Then finally she spoke, but her voice wasn't apologetic. It wasn't full of regret. "I never wanted this to happen," she said, her voice tight, "but I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared." "Scared?" I asked, my voice rising. "Scared of what? Scared of telling me the truth? Scared of your own lies catching up with you?" Claire's eyes welled up with tears. She wiped them away quickly, trying to hold it together. "I didn't know how to tell you," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to disappoint you. You were working so hard, and I couldn't live up to it. I couldn't keep pretending to be something I wasn't." The words hit me like a slap, but there was no relief in hearing her admit it. There was no apology in her voice. No deep sorrow, just self-pity. And something about it, the way she still made it all about her, made my blood boil even more. "I gave you everything," I said, the words finally coming out raw. "And this is what I get. Lies, betrayal. You think you're the only one who's been struggling?" My voice cracked then, and it felt like all the frustration I'd been holding back finally spilled out. "I've been working every day, every single day, trying to give us a future. And this whole time, you've been lying to me. You've been living a double life." I felt like I was suffocating, like the air around me was too thick to breathe. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that she didn't seem to care as much as she should have. It wasn't even about her career anymore. It was about the fact that she'd stopped caring about us. Claire's voice faltered as she tried to explain herself again, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Every word she said felt like a dagger in my chest, and with every second I stayed there, my anger was starting to shift from a hurt, confused rage into something darker, something I didn't want to feel but couldn't stop. "I don't know who you are anymore," I said quietly, my voice almost breaking. "But I can't keep doing this. I'm done." I turned to leave, but then stopped in my tracks, the full weight of what I was saying crashing over me. The life I thought I had, the future I imagined, was gone. Claire had shattered it with every lie, and now there was no going back. I had to make a choice. I could stay and try to fix something that was already broken beyond repair, or I could walk away. But I knew, deep down, there was nothing left to save. I walked out of the room. Without looking back, it felt like my entire world had crumbled in a matter of hours. I was no longer the man I thought I was, no longer the guy who believed in love and loyalty, who worked tirelessly for his family, for his future. I was just a man standing at the edge of a broken dream, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at a friend's place, not sure where else to go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's face, her eyes, the way she looked at me when I confronted her. It wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt, it was the look of someone who knew they were caught but wasn't sorry enough to change. That was the hardest part to swallow. I couldn't go back. I couldn't look at her, pretend like everything would be fine again. It wasn't just the lies about her job. It was the years of little betrayals, the things she'd said, the things she'd done that didn't match the person I thought I knew. But I didn't just want to leave. I couldn't. I wanted her to understand the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to feel the truth of what had happened, how it had shattered everything. I wanted to expose her, not just to myself, but to everyone. I needed a plan. I couldn't just walk away in silence. That wouldn't feel right. I couldn't let her pretend like everything would go back to normal just because she apologized. She needed to face the consequences. I needed to make sure that the truth came out, that she couldn't hide behind her perfect image anymore. So I started gathering everything. I had screenshots of her texts, the emails, the receipts. I kept looking through everything I could find, piecing it together. Seeing the pattern that had been there all along. I knew her social circle. I knew the people who admired us, who thought we were perfect. And that's when it hit me. This was my moment. I was going to expose the lie. I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy me and move on like it was nothing. She needed to lose everything, her image, her reputation. If she thought she could betray me without consequences, she was sorely mistaken. But I wasn't just going to send the evidence to friends or post it online. No, I had a more direct way to do this. I'd planned for the worst, and now it was time to execute it. I was going to send everything to her closest family, her parents, her friends, the ones who always adored her, who thought she could do no wrong. They were the ones who needed to know. They needed to see who she really was. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to make her understand the pain she'd caused me. I needed her to feel it the way I felt it, deep down, every time I thought about what I had lost. This wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about justice. It was about showing her that lying and manipulation had consequences. She couldn't just walk away from the wreckage she'd left behind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about her. This was about me too. About taking back control of my life. About not letting her keep me in this cycle of deceit and gaslighting. I'd been weak. I'd let it go on for too long. But now I was done. I spent the next few days preparing everything, double-checking the evidence, making sure I had everything lined up. I was nervous, I'll admit that. The thought of confronting her again made my stomach churn. But this time, I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I'd already lost everything. Now it was time for her to face the fallout. I didn't know how it was going to play out, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The decision had been made. I had the truth, and this time, there was no way she was getting away with it. I walked out of my friend's apartment the next morning, the weight of everything on my shoulders, but with a sense of clarity I hadn't had in weeks. It was time to finally face her again, to expose everything, and to put an end to this chapter of my life. I don't know what I was expecting when I walked back through that door, but the moment I saw Claire sitting on the couch, her posture stiff and her face pale, I knew one thing. Nothing was going to be the same again. She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face, like she was trying to read my emotions. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice tentative, almost like she was trying to play the part of the concerned wife. "We really need to talk about what happened." I felt a cold rush of anger. It was as if everything I'd been holding in for days, for weeks, suddenly came rushing to the surface. She was still playing the victim, still trying to make it look like it was all my fault somehow. "I'm done talking. Claire," I said, my voice low but firm. "This isn't about us having a discussion anymore. It's about me finally seeing who you really are." Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw real fear in them. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same defensive mask she'd been wearing the whole time. "What are you talking about?" I didn't waste time with small talk. I pulled out my phone and slid the screen towards her. The photos, the texts, the receipts, everything I had uncovered. I watched as she slowly scanned it, her face changing, morphing from confusion to denial to something else I couldn't quite place. "You really think you can just get away with this, don't you?" I asked, my voice shaking with the weight of the betrayal. "You've been lying to me for months, Claire. Years, maybe. The trips, the vacations, the dinners with people I've never even heard of. You stopped working 2 months ago, and you've been pretending ever since. You used me, Claire. You used me to fund your secret life." I saw her stiffen. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was trying to find the words, but none came. She tried to speak, but nothing sounded right. There was no apology in her voice, no remorse, just the hollow words of someone caught in a lie too big to escape. "You think this is just about the money, don't you?" she finally said, her voice cracking. "You think I was just trying to live some fantasy life?" "Well, I wasn't. You don't understand. It wasn't just about me. I was unhappy. I didn't know how to tell you." The words stung, but it wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was how she tried to spin it all into something she could control. How she still didn't understand the gravity of what she'd done. "No, Claire," I said, shaking my head. "It was never about you being unhappy. It was about you lying to us. You tore apart everything we had, and for what? So you could live a lie. You thought you could keep pretending while I worked myself into the ground. And all this time, you were planning your next escape, your next adventure." Her eyes welled up, but I wasn't moved anymore. I couldn't be. I had already moved past the tears and the excuses. I had seen the truth, and it was staring me in the face. "I don't know what to say to you, Claire," I continued, my voice cold now, numb from everything that had happened. "I trusted you, and you threw that away. You betrayed me in ways I can't even begin to explain. But now, I'm done. You don't get to play the victim anymore. You don't get to make this about how unhappy you were. This was your choice. You made this mess, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences." She stood up, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I cut her off. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. Not again. "I don't want to hear it, Claire," I said firmly, turning to leave. "You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You don't get to make me feel sorry for you. You made your bed, now lie in it." The air between us felt suffocating, thick with everything that had gone wrong. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had finally confronted the truth, and I wasn't going to let it control me anymore. But as I drove away, part of me couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep up the act. How long would she hold on to the image of the perfect wife, the perfect life, when everything around her was crumbling? I didn't care anymore. She had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't go back that night. I couldn't. The weight of everything I had just learned, everything I had just thrown at Claire was still pressing down on me, suffocating me with each breath. I didn't want to deal with her anymore. Not right then, not when the rage was still burning hot in my chest. So I stayed with a friend. The next few days passed in a haze of disbelief and anger. I didn't talk to anyone, didn't want to hear anything Claire had to say. Her messages flooded my phone, please. Apologies, excuses, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. What was there to say? The lies were out in the open. The truth had been exposed. There was no going back. But the consequences of Claire's actions didn't just stop with me. The ripple effect spread outward, like a stone dropped into a still pond. The people who had once admired us, who had seen us as the golden couple, started to take notice. I don't know how it happened, but it didn't take long for Claire's perfect image to shatter. Her closest friends were the first to reach out, some expressing their shock, others asking if they could help in any way. But it wasn't long before the rest of her circle started to turn. People I'd never met, but who had always praised us from a distance, began hearing the truth. My family, who had always adored Claire, finally started to see the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. They were furious with her. I wasn't trying to make it public, but Claire's friends couldn't help themselves. They shared what they knew, and soon enough, her deceit became the talk of our entire social circle. It wasn't just about the lies anymore, it was about the years of trust she'd destroyed. People began to realize she wasn't the woman they thought she was. I wasn't the only one who was hurt. The ripple effect was real. And though it felt like I was starting to heal, I could see the destruction Claire had caused in the wake of her lies. She had built herself up on a lie, and now she was watching it all come crashing down. One day, I got a call from her mother. She was crying, and I could barely make out her words through the sobs. "What did you do to her? How could you do this to my daughter?" I sat in silence for a moment, the question echoing in my mind. How could I do this to her? How could I expose her lies, her betrayal? And yet, I couldn't help but feel nothing but anger towards her for what she had done to me. She wasn't the victim here. I was. I had given her everything, and she had repaid me with nothing but deceit. I didn't do anything to her, I said calmly, though my voice was tight with frustration. She did it to herself. She lied to me. She lied to everyone. I'm done being her punching bag. I'm done pretending this is all okay. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could feel the weight of her mother's disappointment, her grief. But I didn't care. The only person I cared about was me. And I had to start taking care of myself for once. But Claire's mother wasn't the only one who reached out. It wasn't long before Claire started calling, texting, emailing, each message more desperate than the last. She told me she was sorry, that she'd been confused, that I was the one she truly loved. But each apology felt like a slap to the face. It was clear she wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry because she was losing everything she had worked so hard to hide. The mask she'd worn for so long had cracked, and now everyone saw the truth. The worst part wasn't that she lied. It wasn't that she'd been unfaithful, in her own way, with me and with the life she pretended to live. It was that she didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a tool to get what she wanted. A paycheck, a safe place to hide her insecurities. I wasn't her partner, I was her pawn. And that, more than anything, was the hardest pill to swallow. The fallout was far from over, and I could feel it every time I thought about the people who had once surrounded us, now turning their backs. But as painful as it was, as much as it tore me apart to see Claire fall from grace, there was a part of me that felt something else, something unexpected. Relief, that I didn't have to live in that lie anymore. Relief that the truth was out, even if it hurt. And as the days went on, I started to feel something like freedom. The weight of her betrayal no longer had a hold on me. I was moving on one painful step at a time, but as much as I wanted to leave it behind, I knew one thing for sure: Claire wasn't going to let go that easily. She was going to fight, and I was bracing for the worst. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I was prepared. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore, and when the time came, I would take back everything she had stolen from me. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. It wasn't long before Claire tried to salvage what was left of her reputation. Her ego, already bruised from everything falling apart, wasn't going to let her go down without a fight. The moment I thought things might finally settle, she made her move. I saw it happen in real time. Her first post. It came through on my feed as a notification. A photo of her smiling, her makeup perfect, her usual air of perfection intact, with the caption, "Sometimes life throws curveballs. Always grateful for the love I have in my life. Hashtag blessed, hashtag grateful, hashtag move forward." She was acting like everything was fine, like nothing had changed, like she was the same woman who'd been lying to me for months. The woman who'd been hiding her deceit behind a mask of charm and false sincerity. It wasn't just a post. It was an attempt to rewrite history, to portray herself as the victim, to gloss over the wreckage she'd caused. The comments rolled in almost immediately. "So proud of you, Claire. You're so strong, girl. Keep shining." And the flood of praise made my stomach churn. I wanted to ignore it. I really did. But the need for justice, for everyone to see the truth, kept me glued to that post. So I did something I'd never thought I would. I took the evidence I had, everything she'd ever hidden, and posted it. I didn't go overboard. No accusations, no sensationalism. Just the facts, the same screenshots, the texts, the emails, the receipts for her vacations and dinners I never knew about. I attached it all in a single post. Alongside my own message: this is what happens when lies are built on the foundation of trust. This is the truth. No filters, no masks, just the reality. I watched as the comments flooded in. At first I didn't know what to expect. Would people believe me? Would Claire manage to twist the narrative in her favor again? But as the minutes passed, my phone started buzzing with notifications. It wasn't just her friends who commented. Her family, her parents, had seen it. They were furious. They flooded the post, each comment more incredulous than the last. Her mother left a scathing reply, calling me a liar. But even she couldn't deny the hard evidence I had presented. But the real twist came when one of her friends, a woman I had never met, but who had always seemed so sweet to Maya, left a comment that cut through everything. "I had no idea you were hiding all this. Claire, I've been hearing rumors for a while, but I never thought it was like this. I'm so sorry you were living this lie, but I think you need to face the consequences now." The words echoed in my mind long after I read them. For the first time, someone was calling her out publicly for everyone to see. The veil was lifting, and there was nowhere for Claire to hide anymore. The backlash was immediate. People who had praised her in the past started distancing themselves. Her coworkers, who had always seen her as the hardworking, ambitious woman, suddenly felt betrayed. She had been feeding them lies about late nights at the office, about the hours she was supposedly working. It all came crashing down. Her social media meltdown didn't stop at that one post. The next day, she tried to reclaim the narrative. She posted a long, rambling apology that seemed more like a desperate plea for sympathy than a genuine admission of guilt. "I've made mistakes," she wrote. "I was trying to balance so much, and I didn't realize I was hurting the people closest to me. I'm sorry to anyone I've let down." It was a classic move attempting to shift the blame, to make herself appear vulnerable. But the damage was done. No one was buying it anymore. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, one of Claire's closest friends, Sarah, the same woman who had been meeting with her all those nights I was working, decided to weigh in. In a message that was so calm and calculated, it sent chills down my spine. She wrote, "Claire, this isn't about mistakes anymore. It's about trust. And you've broken it, not just with him, but with everyone who believed in you." That hit harder than anything else, because in that moment, it wasn't just me who was seeing Claire for who she really was. Everyone was starting to see it. The cracks in her perfect facade, the lies, the manipulations, they were all exposed. And no matter how much she tried to spin it, no matter how many fake apologies she posted, the truth was out there for everyone to see. For the first time since all of this began, I felt something like victory. But it wasn't just about exposing her. It was about the realization that I didn't need her lies anymore. I didn't need her to define who I was. I could finally walk away, head held high, and start rebuilding my life without her. I thought about it as I sat there, watching her social media crumble. This was the moment. This was when I would move on, no longer shackled to a woman who thought she could control the narrative. I had taken control back, but as I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder, what would Claire do now? Would she finally come clean, or would she keep fighting for a narrative she couldn't save? I didn't care anymore. I was done. The truth had finally come out, and Claire's world was in free fall. I could feel the tension lift, but there was still a storm brewing inside me. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She needed to understand the weight of her actions. It wasn't just about the lies anymore. It was about the years of manipulation, the way she had treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. But as I watched her crumble, friends turning away, family pulling back, her social media falling apart, I started to realize that this wasn't just some petty revenge. It wasn't about making her suffer for the sake of it. It was about me reclaiming the power that had been taken from me. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect provider. But what had I gotten in return? Lies, deceit, a wife who was more interested in her image than our marriage. Now, I was going to do something for me. For once, I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. I wasn't going to let her tear me down or make me feel like the villain in this story. I had every right to expose her, to make sure that the people she'd been lying to knew the truth. The first step of my plan was simple. I made sure everyone knew. Her closest family members, her friends, her colleagues, everyone who had been fooled by her perfect marriage illusion. It was all laid out for them. I had nothing left to hide. They could see the truth now, and they could decide for themselves if they still wanted to be in her corner. But it wasn't enough for me to just expose her. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to know that the life she had built on lies was collapsing around her, brick by brick. So, I did something I'd never imagined I would do. I took a step further and contacted her employer. I didn't care if it was going to be messy. I didn't care if it made me look like the bad guy. What mattered was that she was finally going to face the consequences of what she'd done. I didn't just send them the proof of her fake work schedule or the fact that she had been lying about her job. I made sure to emphasize the deception, the hours she had claimed to work while she was off playing her little game of pretend. She had made a career out of lying to me, and now it was time to make sure everyone else knew the truth. Her boss called her in for an urgent meeting. I didn't know the details of what happened there, but when I saw her post about taking some time to reevaluate her professional future the next day, I knew it had hit her hard. The twist was that she didn't just lose her job. Claire lost her entire image. Everything she had carefully crafted, the perfect wife, the successful career woman, was gone in an instant. People started seeing her for what she really was. Her glossy facade of having it all came crumbling down, leaving her exposed for the world to see. But the real kicker came when I saw the message she posted to me, the last one I'd ever get from her. It was a desperate attempt to regain some shred of control, to plead for some kind of redemption. It was full of apologies, excuses, and more blame placed on me. "Please," she wrote, "you know how hard I've been trying? I've been trying to balance everything, trying to make you proud. I never meant to hurt you. Don't let this be how we end." It was a pathetic attempt. I could barely bring myself to read it. She still didn't get it. She still didn't see the destruction she had caused, the years of trust she had shattered. All she could focus on was herself, her needs, her regrets, her image. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: indifference. I had spent so long trying to make this work, trying to fix something that was already broken. And now that it was over, I didn't have the energy to care anymore. I didn't reply to her message. I deleted it. I deleted everything. I was done. I had already taken back my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. And the truth was, I didn't need her to validate me anymore. I didn't need her to apologize. As I sat there, staring at my phone screen, I realized something. The real revenge wasn't in destroying her or in exposing her lies. The real revenge was in my freedom. In moving on, in leaving her behind, and never looking back. I had one. Not because she was exposed, not because she lost everything, but because I had finally taken control of my own story. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. The days after the fallout felt like a blur, but in the best way possible. Every morning, I woke up feeling lighter, like the weight of the last few years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, waiting for the next lie to drop, the next betrayal to surface. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. The decision to expose Claire wasn't about seeing her suffer, it was about taking my power back. It wasn't about seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, my dignity, my peace, my future. And as much as it stung to watch her collapse under the weight of her lies, I knew deep down that it was something she brought upon herself. She had chosen this path, and now there was nothing left for her but the consequences. But the hardest part wasn't just letting go of Claire. It was letting go of the idea of her, the version of her I had believed in, the version that seemed perfect on the outside. I had to mourn that illusion, the fantasy of a happy marriage, the dream I thought we had built together. It wasn't real. And while the truth hurt, it also gave me the closure I needed to move on. As the days turned into weeks, I started to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned everything I had invested in that relationship. But every time I felt that nagging sense of regret creeping up, I reminded myself of why I had done what I did. I had to protect myself. I had to put myself first. I started going back to the things I loved, the hobbies I had put aside, the friendships I had neglected. I began focusing on my work again, pouring energy into projects that mattered to me. The guy who had been consumed by Claire's lies and the weight of our failing marriage was slowly starting to find himself again. It was like I was rediscovering who I was before her, before the illusion, and then something unexpected happened. I met someone. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was casual, almost by accident, at a mutual friends gathering. Her name was Emily, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something spark. It wasn't the head-over-heels obsessive type of feeling I had once had with Claire, but it was different. It was calm. It was easy. And most importantly, it felt real. She didn't try to impress me. She didn't put on a show. She was just herself. And I could tell she wasn't hiding anything, not like Claire had done for so long. Emily was genuine, kind, and open. It was refreshing. It wasn't about rushing into another relationship or trying to fill the void Claire left. No, it was more about recognizing that life could be good again, that I could trust someone else, that I could have happiness without the baggage of lies. But before I allowed myself to get caught up in anything new, I spent a lot of time focusing on myself. I traveled. I spent weekends with old friends. I started therapy to work through the emotional baggage, to truly understand how I had let myself be manipulated for so long. I needed to understand why I had ignored the red flags, why I had let Claire's manipulation cloud my judgment for so long, and I learned something valuable through it all. Healing doesn't come from revenge or from trying to force someone to face their mistakes. Healing comes from within. It comes from making the decision to walk away, to not allow yourself to be defined by someone else's betrayal. It comes from rebuilding your life on your own terms and doing it with strength, grace, and dignity. By the time Emily and I started dating, I wasn't looking for validation. I wasn't looking for someone to fill the hole Claire had left. I was looking for connection, for trust, for a partner who could stand beside me, not behind me, not in front of me, but with me. As the weeks went by, I started to realize just how far I had come since the day I walked out of that house. The person who had been shattered by Claire's lies was no longer there. That person had been replaced by someone who knew his worth, who knew that he deserved honesty, respect, and love. The pain of the betrayal would always sting, but it no longer controlled me. I had taken the time to process, to grow, to heal, and I knew now that I was stronger than I had ever been. I had faced the truth, I had walked through the fire, and now I was on the other side. Looking back, I could see the lessons in it all. I had learned to trust myself again, to set boundaries, to never settle for someone who didn't see me as their equal. I had learned that the greatest revenge was in moving forward, not in anger, not in spite, but in reclaiming my own life. And as I stood there, looking at my new future, I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone or anything take that from me again. For the first time, I truly felt free.